When I started out as a prosecutor years ago, I remember starting off thinking, oh my gosh, there's true evil all around. And you sit there and you see these cases just like, oh yeah, I'm going to hit these cases as hard as I can. But soon after I got into it, particularly learning from my mentors that I worked with at the U.S. Attorney's Office and seeing cases play out, and now I can tell you definitively after being a federal prosecutor for over 20 years, true evil is rare, thank God. So rare.
This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
We are back, RVA Trial Lawyers, and we have a special guest with us today, Mike Gill. Welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And I'll tell you, when I think of Mike Gill, I think of a public servant that's always out to do service. So, Mike, tell us a bit about you. Tell our listeners, who is Mike all about? Why is Mike in the legal profession?
Well, I guess anytime you talk about me, it's where I came from. I grew up in a town of 600 in Texas on a ranch. I'm a fifth generation cattle rancher. That's what my family has done in Texas since the late 1800s. That small town really shaped me. Wonderful people there, and it taught me the values of personal interaction, people who you can learn from, particularly elders in the town, and it had a lot to do with my view of the world, and it still does today. After growing up in Miami, I went to TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. While I was at TCU, I interned at the Department of Justice one semester, the start of my senior year, and absolutely loved it. I've always been brought up, including Miami. It's a very patriotic place, and just love of country, and Washington, D.C. blew my socks off. And seeing what they do at the Department of Justice, and I just thought someday, if I can ever do something like this, that would just be fantastic. And so it was kind of a long-term goal. If I could go to law school and make it one day into justice at the U.S. Attorney's Office, some capacity, I thought that would be fantastic. So after I graduated TCU, I took a year off. I ranched a little bit. Then I taught elementary school in Arlington, Texas, which I adored. And during that year, I got into the University of Virginia. I was fortunate to get in there and went to law school. And while in law school, every summer, I interned at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Dallas, Texas, and loved the work they do, got to know the people. And I always tell people, even when I was working as an AUSA, I would tell interns, take every opportunity when you get something like this, working at an office like this, get to know people, make an impression, show them that you're sincere in your interest to do what they do. That's what I did, and it really paid off, because after law school, I went back to Dallas. I worked for a fantastic civil firm that I loved them, but it just was, my heart was not in it. And after 2 years of that, I was thinking about a change, and I reached out to colleagues that I met over at the U.S. Attorney's Office that said, hey, thinking about a change? I would pretty much do anything to come over there and work with y'all. And they said, well, as a matter of fact, there's a special AUSA position that is going to be funded by the state of Texas to do prosecutions on gun crimes. And so I applied for it, got hired on, and then from there on, the rest was history. But it was a long-term interest I had, and I was very fortunate to get in there from the start.
Interestingly enough, our stories are a bit similar. I was local here and interned at a Commonwealth Attorney's Office in undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to prosecute.
Yeah.
And then I took a year off as well, and then went to law school, and I was like, I just can't wait to get out and prosecute. I guess there's something about when you're naive and still learning about the world and getting that experience that just leaves, these great lasting impression on you.
Absolutely.
So you started private practice in Dallas, went to DOJ, started prosecuting gun cases. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about prosecution. And that's something near and dear to me and also to Sharif, because Sharif did it as well. And we talk, a lot about what it means to prosecute and represent the community. and serving either the state or the country.
Right.
That provides so much for you.
Yeah, and much of what you did was actually in Virginia, right? I mean, at one point you came over to EDVA, is that right?
I did in 2005, after 5 years at the Dallas U.S. Attorney's Office. My wife, Patty, and I she's a Virginia girl, and decided to move from Dallas to Richmond, where both my sisters lived, and she had Virginia roots, and we had our firstborn, and really loved the Richmond area. It's been our home ever since. And so I was fortunate in that I got to transfer from the Dallas U.S. Attorneys into the Eastern District of Virginia. I worked in the Newport News office for, a little over a year and a half, and then spot opened in Richmond and got over here.
What was your main focus when you were at the EDVA?
It varied, and it is such a fantastic office. The Eastern District of Virginia is, I know us within the district say it, but I could say outside the district, people consider it one of the top U.S. Attorney's offices in the country. Eastern District of Virginia has, a wide range, a huge population area we cover. On top of our traditional work that we do for the communities we serve, there's also a huge national security component to the Eastern District of Virginia. Up in Northern Virginia, our Alexandria office, they have the Pentagon. They also have the Central Intelligence Agency and several other components. And the Department of Justice often looks to DOJ or the U.S. Attorney's Office Eastern District to handle some of the high-profile terrorism cases for our country, us in the Southern District of New York and other districts in the country. But it's a lot of that work. When I first came to Richmond, I started, doing a lot of drug, violent crime work, also lots of white collar. It evolved over the years. I was fortunate in that I was able to supervise the drug and narcotics unit as a deputy criminal supervisor here in Richmond for a period of time. Just loved that work, and also lots of fantastic white collar cases. And over the years, I had a wide range. And that's the cool thing about being an AUSA in a district like this, that you can pretty much devote your time to it, work on your craft, and you will get really interesting cases where you feel like you're making a difference for the community. And very different cases, like back in 2007, soon after I moved over here to Richmond, the Michael Vick dogfighting case came up. And, I was fortunate to be tapped by the U.S. Attorney, Chuck Rosenberg, at the time to work on that. It was a very interesting, very impactful, important case. And I remain convinced this day, if the U.S. Attorney's Office had not done it, it was not going to be prosecuted by the local jurisdiction. So it was a neat case.
We're going to circle back to that case.
Yeah, actually, if I remember correctly, I think I watched a documentary on it a few years ago, and I actually remember seeing you getting interviewed about it. I didn't really appreciate the extent of the case until I saw that documentary.
But, it was very interesting, very righteous prosecution. I'm very proud of how our office handled it. Partners I worked with on the case, including one of the coolest things about that, aside from the work we did to bring justice, was the forfeiture aspect of that. There's Wynn Grant and Gordon Kronberger, two AUSAs that are recognized experts in Department
I know
of Justice.
Gordon. Gordon was kind of my, I guess not supervisor, my mentor that summer I was at EDVA. He's awesome.
He is awesome. He's cool, and he's
a dog lover too. So I'm sure,
is.
I think he was very proud to work on that case.
Yeah, and he's very creative. And I have to credit Gordon and also Wynn with coming up with a plan that allowed us to forfeit the dogs. Because when the dogs were first seized, over 54 of them, and these dogs had been used for dog fighting. They had been through a whole lot, and the traditional wisdom at the time was every one of them has to be immediately euthanized. And they came up with the forfeiture theory that allowed us to get those dogs, to get them into Marshall's custody. And then Michael Vick, we forfeited the money from him to pay for the evaluation of those dogs, to figure out if we could save some of them, which we did overwhelmingly. I think there was only just 3 or 4 that had to be put down because they were beyond, we couldn't do anything for them. But the rest of them, over 50 of them, were able to place with different places, and also Resurrection Kennel out in Utah, I believe, that took those dogs in and was able to give them a life, and they call them the victory dogs. So it was just something very proud of, and you credit people that are smart that you get to work with and you learn from. And Gordon Kronberg and Wynn Grant tremendous in that they carried that and allowed us to do that in the case. And also, I know that Michael Vick, it gave him the opportunity to make right, what had happened. Interesting thing, I'll tell you all that people ask me on that case, because Michael Vick got 23 months in prison, and he fell very far on that case, and he pleaded guilty. He went to prison. And when he came out, I don't know if y'all recall, people were very upset when he got back up in the NFL, and people would ask me, what do you think about that? I'm like, hey, that's great. That is exactly what you want and what our justice system is about. It is about people paying their debt to society, accepting responsibility, and turning their lives around. And Michael Vick was an example of that. And anybody asked me, I would say, I'm very happy. And I wish him all the success because he stood up, accepted responsibility, fell very far, and got back up. And that is what it's all about. And if not, then what's the system about?
I remember actually, I think it was it Tony Dungy, Donovan McNabb, like a few of those guys, I think ended up really coming out and helping Michael Vick. And what did he go to the Eagles and then eventually took over at some point and then jumped around a few teams before retiring. But yeah, it's an impressive story of rehabilitation. And you're right, that is what it's about. And actually, it's one of the things that I get most depressed about our criminal justice system is oftentimes we're not seeing rehabilitation and we're seeing very long criminal records and seemingly no end to them, right? And it's like, in a perfect world, we don't want you to come back. We want you to accept responsibility, learn, and then eventually become a productive member of society. And I've come to believe that the criminal justice system in many respects just doesn't have all the tools to really make that happen. I mean, so much of it is education, jobs, housing, how they were raised. It can be very depressing.
Mike, you touched on it. The success story of Michael Vick after serving 23 months is justice playing through. And justice just not stopping at, hey, we're going to convict the guy and lock him up. It's cheering someone's success after the fact, after they rehabilitated. And he's made amends. Not only has he made amends, he's made a difference in other people's lives. Why don't we see that as often in our criminal justice system today?
In over 20 years with the federal criminal justice system and also seeing, where y'all work, I do believe it's actually getting better on that front. But that's been something, you see, and I know y'all have seen big cases where you do something that's impactful for a community. I think of one down in Dallas, prosecuted this Crips gang that had an entire 2 square mile area in southeast Dallas, basically under the control for years. Very high crime area. We went in with an operation, did an undercover, and took them out, prosecuted over 20 of them. And I was ecstatic when the next year, the Dallas Police Department statistics showed that we had dropped the criminal rate by like 54% in that area. For those people, how amazing.
That's amazing. 20 people.
Yeah. But then, guess what? About 2 years later, it was back up again. And that's just heartbreaking, right? You see those things, and it's about thinking of ways to break that pattern. Where do we put our resources, not only to help people, when they pay their debt to society and they want to do better and they come out, help those people get a start, let them succeed and cheer them on and help them out. But also the communities where we do an impactful case, what can we do to make sure that once you create a vacuum by taking out a group, that it isn't just filled again by another group and circumstances. And it's complicated. I wish I had the answers on that because that is something that we all think about. And I know our Commonwealth attorneys partners, they think about it too, but it's a long-term thing. But I do think resources towards helping people get back out and start productive lives, I think we're getting better on that. Mental health, helping people that have problems, because you guys know it. When I started out as a prosecutor years ago, I remember starting off thinking, oh my gosh, there is true evil all around. And you sit there and you see these cases just like, oh yeah, I'm going to hit these cases as hard as I can. But soon after I got into it, particularly learning from my mentors that I worked with at the U.S. Attorney's Office and seeing cases play out And now I can tell you definitively, after being a federal prosecutor for over 20 years, true evil is rare, thank God. So rare. And otherwise, it is circumstances, choices, people do things, and there has to be consequences. We're a nation of laws, but also, how do you help people get back up on their feet?
Mike, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was having that same exact conversation this morning. I had a young kid who was up for review for a murder case. And as a young prosecutor, it's law and order. It's convict, lock them up. But then the longer you start to do this, you start to look at the defendant more than just a name on the front of a file. Mm-hmm. You start to see them as a human being, and because of the circumstances that they were raised in, they're doing certain things a particular way that's not the right way. They're a product of their upbringing. And human beings are easily influenced. And when are you the most fragile to be influenced? It's when you're a young kid and you don't know any better, right? And it's funny because it goes back to your internship when you were at TCU and my internship when I was at VCU. Our first real professional job, or in quotations, as a young adult, was in a prosecutor's office for both of us.
I interned at EDVA my first year and then Philly DA my second year. And you'd asked me then what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I would have said the same thing. Prosecute, prosecute, prosecute.
And Sharif, it's the fact that my first real job, or I guess I call it an internship, was when I put a suit on and went to court, was as a prosecutor. And I would drive up and down on Perham Road and look to the right. And I'm like, I want to work in this office. I want to park my car back there. That was before I even was accepted to a law school. So I went to law school to prosecute at a state level. And we just talk about, how easily we are molded as beings and kids there, and us, for us, we're adults. And a simple 2-month internship or a 3-month internship has molded a 20-year career for you and over 10 years for me.
Yeah. I went to VMI, and I was fortunate enough to get elected to the honor court, which VMI's got a very unique system in that single sanction honor system, in that you can have a trial, like a full-blown criminal. Well, it's not criminal, but it resembles a criminal trial to adjudicate an honor offense, and I got to be a prosecutor. And I remember during that time looking up the Department of Justice, and I had no context for what it really meant or what it was. But I remember seeing a video, and it was someone talking about how great it is to work there because their only job is to do right. Like, that's it. Like, their job is just, and that got me on the train of, man, I just want to prosecute. But what's interesting about me, at least, is that I went into the Army thinking that's all I'm going to do is prosecute. And as the Army does, it throws you into situations that you weren't expecting. And I became a criminal defense attorney, and my God, did I love it. And I've looked back, and it's largely because of the soldiers I got to represent. I wasn't dealing with people who had criminal records, because if they did, they wouldn't be in the service, right? It was people who deployed, who'd raise their right hand to serve. And it was incredible. It was eye-opening to some extent. It's also screwed me up, right? Because if I didn't have that experience, I'd probably still be at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office or still fighting to get into EDVA. But it's an incredible job, but certainly not an easy one, right?
No, it's not. I think about what you're talking about, being able to represent people. And I got to do that for a period of time between DEA and coming back to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I worked with people like Jeff Everhart, who I told y'all was a major mentor of mine, and I learned a lot from Jeff. I learned a lot. And I think about when I was doing that, and I got to do several court-appointed cases, and those were some of my favorite cases that I got to do during that period of my career. Learned a lot from those folks, and I think about what Judge Claire Cardwell now. Judge Cardwell, when she was in private practice, I went up against her in a trial, and we duked it out, and she was an amazing criminal defense lawyer, one of the best I've ever seen. And she also would talk to our interns at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We would have her as a guest to share with them her perspective as a criminal defense lawyer. And I'll never forget one of the things that Claire said about the reason she loved what she did is that she loves being there for people in the darkest times of their life. And she said, when the criminal justice system comes down on someone, and she said, here federally, oh my gosh, you got the entire United States upon you. In state court, you got Virginia upon you, those resources. And she says, I enjoy being that person in their corner because everybody deserves somebody there for them to help them, guide them through it. And if they want to fight it out, they're going to get good representation. I guarantee you they got it from her. That is an amazing position to be in, to help people and help them make good choices, because a lot of the good criminal defense lawyers I know, they help guide their clients through the process, let them see their choices, help them make good decisions, and that's how the justice system works.
The hard part, though, is I like winning, and you don't win as a criminal defense lawyer. In the Army, I got to win. It was pretty incredible. And I think large part because my clients had very redeemable qualities. So sometimes the win wasn't guilty, not guilty. It was whether they were retained, right, in the service versus let go. The Army had, at the time, and probably still does, has unfortunately a track record of putting up pretty terrible cases. And largely because, I mean, sex assault, rape's been a big issue in the military for a while. I mean, it's a big issue everywhere.
Right.
And it's changed in the last couple of years. But for the longest time, commanders for those types of cases, for all cases, they're the charging authority, meaning that they're the ones who sign off saying, take it to court-martial. And the reality is, if you're a commander, the last thing you want is someone in Congress saying, hey, why aren't you taking this victim seriously by not pushing this case to court-martial? So the default position was, let's send it to court-martial. So then you've got he said, she said, alcohol involved, nobody. We could win. But what I've learned, at least in the civilian world, is, my gosh, it is hard to win. You have to redefine winning, and your clients aren't necessarily always too terribly thrilled with you either. It's a hard profession, but you're right. I think it can also be incredibly meaningful.
Everybody needs somebody. And one thing I'll say, I think that is a credit to the enforcement and how it works, that they do good work. And that you can trust a lot of the cases. Now, federally particularly, I mean, my goodness, when they come, you know, we got a lot of resources and they take time. And I know also at the state level, that is a credit to the work they do. They work very hard. It's all part of the same system, and we have to keep a bird's eye view. The system is designed to take care of our community, make sure that the laws are enforced. People do bad things, there's accountability, and we're able to bring cases and let the justice system sort it out.
And Mike, you're exactly right. We answer to the community.
Yep.
That's who you represent. That's what I tell jurors and voir dire when I get up. I'm like, it doesn't matter what's my name. It matters what I do and who I represent. And I represent each and every one of you, unless I'm in Judge Harris's courtroom. He's like, move on, Mr. Abuzaki. But when I hear prosecutors say they want a case, it rubs me the wrong way. Their egos win. But justice is not a win, because you have a victim that's been victimized, and a conviction does not erase that victimization or that trauma. And you have a defendant that has made a choice that led them to lose time from their life incarcerated behind bars. And I often say, every second that God gifts us is a blessing. So imagine the seconds and minutes and hours and days and years that they lose.
Yep.
So we go back to doing right as a prosecutor and representing someone in their darkest moment. You, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, was a line prosecutor, and then you became a supervisor, and then you became the chief of the criminal section. What does it take for a prosecutor to do right?
A lot of it comes down to judgment and doing the right thing. I'll share with you something that is in the culture of the Eastern District of Virginia. And this was told to me years ago when I joined the district. And as criminal chief, I met with every new AUSA that joined us and told them these things. And the U.S. Attorney Chuck Rosenberg, who was one of the first U.S. attorneys I worked for in the district, this is something that he taught me. And also I worked for him at DEA, and he told all of the DEA men and women this same thing. And I think it rings true about expectations. So we sit down with AUSAs and tell them, hey, it is so great to have you joining us. And I'm going to share with you the office expectations of what we expect from you as an AUSA, and also what you can expect from me. Same thing. Number one, do justice. Do the right thing. No matter what, at the end of the day, that's what we get to do. We're fortunate to get to do it. You are entrusted by this office to do justice. And make sure you hold that close and don't ever deviate from that. Never compromise Always do the right thing. And while doing it, we expect that you're going to work very hard. There's going to be times when you're getting ready for trial that you're going to be spending endless days and weeks getting ready and everything that it takes to do justice. And we expect that you're going to do that. So that's number one. Number two is take care of yourself. Whatever it is that matters to you outside of this office, be sure you nourish it, take care of it. For many like myself, it's my family. And it's very easy to get caught up in this and to lose sight of things like that. But we want you to be here as a long-term player, as a long-term prosecutor, contributing to the Eastern District of Virginia. And people that lose sight of that, sometimes they burn out. We don't want that for you. So be sure you keep that and preserve it. Take care of yourself outside this office. Number three, treat everyone with civility and respect, period. That's everybody we work with at every level. Staff is the key to what we do. Treat them with civility and respect at all times. Be kind to them and take care of them. And the agents we get to work with, and oh my goodness, the victims that we serve, the communities, everyone, including the defendants, with respect, always. Don't ever make this personal. And let them know that, one of the things that you do as a federal prosecutor, at times you do reverse proffers, where you sit down with a criminal defendant across the table. A lot of times this is the first time these folks have come into contact with a federal prosecutor, with the agent there, with their attorney, and you explain to them this situation. And when I've done that in the past, I always like to look them in the eye and tell them, hey, listen, I'm not here to tell you you're a bad person. I'm here to tell you what you're facing. And everything I tell you, you can take to the bank. And I want you to make an informed choice. So when I tell you that the evidence is going to be this, you can take it to the bank that I firmly believe it. And I want you to account for that and talk to your attorney and decide what you want to do. What I don't want to happen is one of these days you decide that you don't want to consider a plea offer. You go all the way to trial. And when we do go to trial, you're not going to like what I do, because I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do my job on behalf of the United States and present the evidence. And it is a strong case, and I really believe you will be convicted at the end of this case. At that time, I don't want you to hang your head and think, gosh, I wish I would have considered this earlier. So this is a good opportunity for us to share. And I've found treating people with respect, having those conversations, is one of the most effective resolution tools for cases. And so we wrap that in our expectations for prosecutors. Treat everyone with civility and respect, including the defendants. Don't ever make it personal. Don't ever make it personal. Number four, and this is critical, and y'all know this from your work. Number four, we all make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Trust us to stand behind you when you make a mistake. Let's work it out together. What you never want to do is brush a mistake under the rug and not own it, because that's when I've seen careers get ruined like that. We don't want that to happen. Trust us and understand this, that we all make mistakes, including, one of the things we do at EDVA is we have one of our training sessions we put on for our AUSAs, and we have some of the most experienced senior trial lawyers in the office explain to them the biggest screw-ups that they had in their career. And it's amazing the impact that has on young prosecutors, because they're like, wow, the people that are infallible in their view are human, and they made mistakes just like I make mistakes. And people, if you can get them comfortable with that, that is one of the greatest things. People own their mistakes and come forward. And then the fifth and final thing, and I think this really relates to what you're talking about, Eastern District of Virginia has a reservoir of credibility that's been built up. We've been around for 200 years now. It's been built up by people that come long before I was ever with the office, and now that I'm gone, it's upheld by people that will be there long after. And they won't remember me, but what they do know is that the defense bar, the judges, the communities we serve, they all know that this office is here to do the right thing. And we have to protect that. Anytime we see something that happens that causes that reservoir to leak, we have to act immediately to stop it, fix it, own it, and make sure we maintain the credibility of this office, because that is the ball game. And at the end of the day, if we don't have that here in the communities we serve, we got nothing. So that ballpark is kind of what was shared with me, and I've seen that, and I think it's one of the recipes to success for the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Eastern District of Virginia.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm glad this was recorded.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an incredible office, and it's got an incredible reputation. I think we're at a point where it might make sense to ask you a little bit about trial work. So,
All right.
one thing that I've noticed and heard about is that the federal trial has died is probably the wrong descriptor, but certainly over the years has been less and less frequent.
Yeah.
Did you see that over the 20 plus years that you were in the office?
I did. You don't see as many trials as you used to federally. Over the course of my federal career, I tried 52 federal jury trials to verdict. And a lot of those I got earlier on in my career, in 2000 up through 2010. And I think that we tried more cases back then. I don't think quite as many are tried now in the system. But I don't think that's necessarily a negative. I think there's a lot of factors in that. One of the factors is the mandatory sentencing guidelines, federal. They were mandatory, and only under certain defined circumstances, exceptions, could a judge go outside those guidelines. And now, under the Supreme Court law and everything that governs what the federal government does.
Well, that was the Booker case, right? I
mean, Booker and all of the cases that followed.
Right.
Judges have more discretion, and I think that leads to sentencing discretion, which opens up resolutions on cases sometimes where we couldn't get them in the past. Overall, I view that as a positive for the system. You'll get differences between judges, but on the whole, you're able to put everything on. The defense gets to be heard, and then the judges make the decisions and have more discretion. The guidelines are part of it, but it doesn't drive everything. They consider everything about the case, the defendant, their circumstances, in reaching a sentence. We don't try as many cases as we used to. And I say we, I'm out of the U.S. Attorney's Office now, but I often refer to them as we, that they're rarer than they used to be.
You're right. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? One potential explanation is that the U.S. Attorney's Office and their supporting agents, right, do a hell of a job getting these cases wrapped up. I remember I was clerking for a federal district judge. I was in the District of New Mexico, and largely the reason why I went was because New Mexico has one of the heaviest federal criminal dockets in the country because it's of the border state, and I think it's per capita. It's the southwest border. Well, you've got, Western Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, right, Southern California. Those districts are just overwhelmed. And then also the Indian reservations. If there's a felony level crime that happens on an Indian reservation, the federal court has original jurisdiction over that offense. So anyways, but I actually remember there was a case where I think it was a machine gun prosecution. Anyways, the defendant seemed like he had some serious issues, but I remember there being some issues with, maybe it was either these text messages that the agent had were no longer available, but the U.S. Attorney's Office at one point just said, all right, we're dismissing it. There was some hole, and they said, we're just not going to go forward on this case. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. I mean, it just shows that they're here to call balls and strikes, and they're going to do the right thing. And if there are issues, and then maybe they'll just say, you know what, we'll get them next time. And I imagine most U.S. Attorney's offices have that same approach, and I imagine most prosecutors, I think, have that same approach.
It's doing the right thing.
Yeah,
do the right thing at all times.
It's doing the right now.
thing.
I do sometimes take issue with the mandatory minimums because it does kind of take away from the judge's ability to sentence, right, in the way that they wish. It also, I think, sometimes gives the prosecutor maybe a little bit too much authority when it comes to negotiations. And I feel the same way about some of the caps and the personal injury stuff as well. I do think we should trust our prosecutors and our judges and our defense attorneys, right, to ultimately do the right thing. And sometimes I think some of the laws that we have in place really make it hard.
Right. And I think under the current Department of Justice guidelines from the Attorney General, they have opened this up, and I've seen this in the past in prior administrations as well, where prosecutors need to consider the unique circumstances of the case, the defendant, and choose the appropriate charges. And just like anything else, that doesn't mean that you bring a sledgehammer to deal with a situation. It depends upon what's going on and choosing the mandatory minimums appropriate for the case. And that is definitely where the department is right now, what they want prosecutors to do to hopefully avoid some of that, but also recognize the fact that Congress does set the laws. And
That's
there
right.
are certain crimes and certain conduct that falls within those mandatory minimums, and that is the way it is. But there is charge selection options for prosecutors based on case circumstances. So they're able to do that.
Well, and prosecutorial discretion is massive, right?
Right.
And it's incredibly important. I remember I was super naive early on. I think I was still at VMI, and I was playing the prosecutor role in the honor court. And I was like, well, we put it up and we see what happens, right? We just see what the jury does. And I've since learned, like, this is such a terrible way to look at it. No, I mean, like, especially with my experience in the Army, where sometimes you don't know what a jury's going to do. You just have no clue, right? And at the end of the day, if the prosecutor isn't firmly convinced that they can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt and that the charges they're pursuing are righteous charges, then I think the case shouldn't go forward.
I don't ever make the decision to prosecute a case if I don't believe the jury is going to convict beyond a reasonable doubt, because sometimes you have the evidence, but you can't introduce the evidence. You know the defendant committed the crime, as in, about a year and a half ago, I had an eyewitness to a murder. She died a few months before the murder. And a lot of my colleagues were like, no, this case is not going to go far. We put the case on, and in less than 30 minutes, they came back with a first-degree guilty verdict. And that was a case where I didn't know that they were going to come back beyond a reasonable doubt, but something happened during the trial. I knew the defendant did it. I had an eyewitness, but she died.
Yeah. Was it the 14 bullets one?
The 14 bullets.
Yeah.
And so, yes, discretion is important. And finding the right people to prosecute is more important, because a great prosecutor has to be a great human. A great human that not only looks at the victim, but also considers the defendant. And that's sometimes what some prosecutors, younger prosecutors, lose sight of. But going back to the 5 things that Eastern District of Virginia expects from their prosecutors and spelling that out, that's important. That's so important. So the trial, even if the trial at the outset may not be a guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt in the mind of the prosecutor, if they believe that the defendant committed the crime beyond reasonable doubt, and they have the evidence, then I'm going forward. Going back to the trial, you've done over 50 trials as a federal prosecutor. Is there a particular trial that stands out in your mind?
A few stand out, and hitting on just what you were just talking about.
Yes.
I've lost 2 federal jury trials, big cases. One of them, I couldn't believe it. One of them, I understand why. And anytime a prosecutor, and this is something particularly federally, when new AUSAs come in, they get under the impression that you cannot lose a case. And like, that is not the case. Do the right thing. We bring hard cases, and you're going to lose cases at times. There's just no doubt about it. Just make sure we're doing the right thing and doing all we can. And when an AUSA would lose a case, I was very happy to reach out and say, hey, man, I've lost 2 jury trials. They hurt, but I learned a lot from those cases. And continue, you got to get back up on that horse. Right now you're hurting, but get back up on that horse, and we ride again with confidence. And if you lose the next one, it's okay. Are we doing the right thing? Are we moving forward on righteous cases, doing the right thing? And I learned more from those trials than ones I won, actually.
Agree with that wholeheartedly.
You really do. And it's important for people to understand and have courage to bring tough cases. Got to. And that is one of the things that the supervisors, when I was criminal chief, I really tried to make sure that the prosecutors understood that and not to be afraid. If we're doing the right thing and we've got a strong case, but it has flaws, we bring it to a jury and then let the chips fall where they may. Exactly. And the office will stand behind you. Jury trials that stand out.
Or any trial. Doesn't have to have gone to a jury.
Yeah, I mean, one in particular, I was lucky to work on this one here in Richmond, and it was the last one that I tried before I went to DEA with Chuck Rosenberg. It's a defendant named Iraq Hamadulin, and he was the first non-U.S. citizen battlefield capture tried in an Article III United States court. And he had been captured in Afghanistan in 2009. He was a former Soviet Union tank commander. So he was trained in Soviet Union tactics. And then he defected and went to Afghanistan and joined the Taliban, where he was incredibly respected. And he led insurgents when the U.S. forces were there after 9/11 on attacks. And one night in November 2009, he led an attack against an Afghan border patrol unit located right on the Afghan border with Pakistan. He had roughly 40 insurgents with him, and they were armed very heavily, and they started attacking, and they called for U.S. support. So the Army came in and helicopters, and we did what we had to do, and they brought those forces. They engaged with the Taliban insurgents, wiped them all out. The next morning, the Army was up there doing a battlefield assessment, and Iraq Hamadulin had been up on a hill, had been calling the shots, and they came up on him. He shot at them, and they ended up shooting him in the butt and then took him into custody. And he remained in U.S. custody till the end of 2014. And at that time, the decision was made we could not hold any more prisoners in Afghanistan. So the question was, what does the United States do with Iraq Hamadulin? If they returned him to Russia, they were convinced that he would be executed. If they turned him over to the Afghans, they were convinced that he would be executed. And so the decision was made, and President Obama himself approved the decision to bring him to the United States to face charges for providing material support to terrorists, for attacking U.S. soldiers and persons assisting U.S. soldiers, our Afghan Border Patrol partners. So we indicted him, and the case was charged here in Richmond, Virginia. My partner on the case, Jim Gillis, who put the case together from the start, and I was lucky to be able to jump on with him, and Jennifer Levy, who was the Department of Justice trial attorney. We handled that case. It was pending here before Judge Henry Hudson. The end of 2014, when we got approval from the president to bring him here, they flew him from Afghanistan, and he landed at the Richmond International Airport, and that gave us first brought jurisdiction in the United States. And we went through all of the pretrial litigation, including interesting and complicated Geneva Convention issues, because he was claiming that he was protected under the Geneva Convention, but it was not an international armed conflict at the time that he was engaging with us, because the United States was there with Afghanistan firmly with us. And also, he was not an enemy combatant. He was with an insurgent force, the Taliban Haqqani network. But we had to litigate that, and it was quite a deal, but we prevailed. And then went to jury trial. That trial was amazing. And of all the witnesses I put on, one of the coolest ones, there was this helicopter pilot who grew up here in Richmond, Virginia, Patrick Kelly. And he flew Kiowa Warriors for the Army over there in Afghanistan. And I'm going to tell you, setting up the trial was fascinating because we knew the amount of awesome force that was brought by the U.S. military. We did not want the jury to think, oh my goodness, that they were unjustified in what they did. So we took great care in that trial in laying out everything about the U.S. counterinsurgency strategy that they had done to try to help the Afghan people. Everything they had done to build it up, establishing the justice system, the care that our military took with their rules of engagement, which I know you know from your experience, VMI and after, very well thought out rules of engagement where the U.S. would not bring the awesome military force unless they confirmed that we're dealing with insurgent forces. And then once we determined we bring the awesome force, because if we don't, next day it'll be a U.S. soldier or an Afghan, somebody else suffering under them. So we laid all that out. Then we got into the engagement. So Patrick Kelly tells us about that they got the call to go out there that night. And this was in the middle of the night. Army soldiers were on the ground. There are Apache helicopters and there are Kiowa Warrior helicopters. He was a Kiowa pilot. I asked him to explain to the jury, which one would you prefer? And he said, I'd take the Kiowa Warrior every time. Well, why is that? He said, because you can truly feel the battlefield and what's going on the ground in a Kiowa Warrior. You have the doors off and we're right there and you can see what's going on and you can feel it. He said, an Apache, that is an incredibly armed helicopter, said you cannot feel that way. Now, you got a lot of strength and force, but it's not what a Kiowa Warrior can do. And he said, my job was to find out what was going on the ground, who we're dealing with, and determine whether we could engage with them. So the military, through the Department of Defense, they unclassified a lot of this information that we're able to use in a jury trial. So everything I'm telling you is unclassified, thank God.
Otherwise, we'd get a little knock on the door here. Right?
Yeah, I think they would already be here.
Yeah, or maybe they are. Yeah, especially with someone who's named Sharif, right? No. And now,
Abuzaki's better than for you.
Oh my gosh,
we're screwed. Save us, Mike.
Oh man.
Yes.
So we laid all that out, And Kiowa Warrior helicopter pilot Patrick Kelly is telling them, and we had the video footage from the Apaches that are shot, and you could see the side of this mountain. And these mountains in Afghanistan are they're massive. And you could see the heat signatures of the insurgents that are laying up on this hill. They're like dots all along that hill. And you can see them, the helicopter pilots are calling. We got suspected up there, but they had to determine rules of engagement if these were folks that they were dealing with insurgents and not dealing with somebody who's innocent. So they had to establish those rules of engagement. So Patrick Kelly took his helicopter down with the doors off, and he had a friend there with him who had a machine gun. They got within 15 yards with that Kiowa Warrior of these guys on the side of this mountain. And we've got the footage from the Apache that shows the jury what's happening. He turned the rotor wash onto them. And when they do that, the Taliban insurgents were hiding under blankets. The blankets start whipping around. And when that happens, all of a sudden you start seeing weapons that they're laying on. And the helicopter is able to identify those. And you can hear them calling out, we got an RPG. All right, we got an AK-47. And the pilots are calling out. Meanwhile, Patrick Kelly's doing that. And I had him get down from the stand and ask Judge Hudson if he could go show the jury about how far he was from these folks. So he got down from the stand, got within 15 yards of the jury. And I said, tell them, give them an idea of how loud this is when you're in your Kiowa Warrior with the rotor wash turned on these folks. Give us an idea of what kind of force we're talking about. He said, the only thing I could tell you that could be like that is if you're standing by a railroad track within a couple of feet of a freight train that's going by you about 70 miles per hour. And he said, that's probably about what it's like. It's very loud, and there's a lot of wind whipping around. And one of the engagement rules was that when people don't move and you got that kind of force, they're insurgents. That was one of them. And then the weapons helping everything else. And so the jury saw how they cleared that, making sure that they're indeed dealing with insurgents. And then they told Patrick Kelly to get out of there. He took his helicopter back, and then the Apaches came in and they took care of it. And we also had him explain to the jury why they had to do that, and the fact that we're talking huge mountains, and to get Army forces up there to try to dislodge them would result in loss of life with U.S. and Afghan forces, and that they would not surrender, and that they had been attacking, and we got them with weapons. And this is unfortunate what we have to do, but we're fighting a war. And I guarantee you the jury got it, and I know the defense got it. In fact, Claire Cardwell was one of the lawyers on that too, and Rob Wagner and some other very good lawyers. Everybody completely understood what we were about, and it made me, as an American, very proud of the work that our troops were doing in Afghanistan. It was professional. It was just incredible, the care they took. And so the jury got it. They came back at the end of that trial guilty across the board on Iraq Hamadullah, and he's now doing 2 life sentences plus a lot of years out in Florence, Colorado. And when we talked about true evil earlier, I told you true evil is rare. Iraq Hamadullah was one of the very few that I've dealt with where I was like, true evil. The military forces, the personnel that we talked to who had dealt with him, they said, do not ever get too close, and make no mistake. He would kill you in a second. And in the trial, I remember looking over at him, and just the look that he gave us back is chilling, and just a complete lack of a soul and just not caring.
Bringing it back full circle, we started about you serving the community and serving this country. And that's a great example of service to the flag that stands behind you. Because as you're telling the story, I'm thinking about how blessed we are sitting on this piece of realty on earth. You know, we're not perfect, but we are the greatest country on earth, and there is no close second.
Right.
As I'm listening, I'm looking right past you and just looking at that flag. It's special.
Yeah. So, Mike, what are you up to now?
So with HII, which is a corporation, it's based in Newport News, and we build the aircraft carriers and the subs and Coast Guard cutters for our country. It is an amazing company, and we also have, there's 3 divisions in HII. You got Newport News Shipbuilding that goes back to the late 1800s, based in Newport News, and it is the sole builder for aircraft carriers right now for the U.S. Navy. So we're building those out there, and we also work on and recommission aircraft carriers that come in for overhaul after certain years of service, and all the submarines, Virginia-class submarines, Columbia-class submarines that we're building. And it is an amazing company with a lot of history down in Ingalls in Pascagoula, Mississippi. They build a lot of ships for the Navy, for the Marines, also Coast Guard cutters, and that's a company that goes back to the 1930s. 11,000 employees there. Out in Newport News, we got 26,000, and then up in Northern Virginia and around the world, we have Mission Technologies, roughly 7,000 employees. And the thing that appealed to me about it is it's country service work for the United States. I could be very proud of, and the military. So I'm the Director of Investigations for HII. I particularly focus on Newport News and also work with key partners at Ingalls and Mission Technologies. And we help investigate anytime there's a suspected misconduct within the company, or if there's something that happens safety-wise, somebody gets hurt. I work with a retired Virginia Beach police detective who's outstanding, and she and I partner up. We also partner up with other investigators and attorneys around the company, and we investigate and figure out what's happened here. If there is misconduct, we deal with it and report it to the government. And sometimes there's actually prosecution that comes out of those as appropriate, called by the circumstances. We also help fix things, figure out ways to do things better, learn from things that happen. If something happens safety-wise, what happened and how do we make things safer? Because the work that the employees do out there at Newport News Shipbuilding, Ingalls, and Mission Technologies, it's amazing. It's also dangerous work. Building these ships, the welders and all of the engineers and people that are out there doing that work, you can imagine things can go wrong if you're not being careful. We've got to make sure we have the right safety procedures. So it's a very interesting job, very different from what I've done before. I also work with my boss, Jeff Bauer, on a lot of the litigation involved in the company. You can imagine there's going to be lawsuits, and so I'm able to bring some of my experience to help with those and work with outside counsel. So it's been interesting, and I'm very fortunate to be there. I'm excited to be working for HII.
And are you working out of Newport News? Or?
Yes. Yeah, I'm out there, 4 or 5 days a week, and that was part of it. Our kids are here in Richmond, 2 in high school and 1 in college, and the ones in high school are doing great. So my wife and I didn't want to move, but this opportunity came up to do work for HII, and my wife knows I'm a service guy, and she's just like, listen, this is an opportunity, doesn't come up very often. We're just going to do it, and we make it work, and I'm lucky to have that job.
And they're lucky to have you as well.
No, thanks. It's a cool place. It's very cool. And I tell them this, I did not have a fine appreciation, because when I was the criminal chief for the Eastern District of Virginia, we cover HII right out there, Newport News, and also Northern Virginia. I did not have an appreciation for how closely they work with the U.S. military. Like out there at Newport News Shipbuilding, the U.S. Navy, they're out there with us all day, everywhere. Navy personnel, they're shoulder to shoulder. In fact, when something goes wrong, the Navy knows as quick as we do. And it's that kind of cool collaboration that's fascinating to see the government working with a private company to do what's important for the defense of our country, because it is of critical importance, as we know, with worldwide events. These aircraft carriers and these submarines are very important for the security of our country and the world, and it's very inspiring, hard work that they do out there, and I love it. I also love the blue-collar aspect of it. It reminds me where I grew up in Miami with the people that I respect and worked with, just hard-working, great people that really get an appreciation for what it means to go out there every day and do what you have to do to get the job done.
That's awesome. I couldn't imagine getting to watch a aircraft carrier being built. I mean, it must take forever, but it must be very, very impressive.
It takes years, and it is impressive, and I'm still in awe when I go out there. The aircraft carriers are impressive. The submarines are impressive. Everything that they do and how they put those together, incredible.
It started with the morals, values, and principles of a small town from Texas. And you're seeing those moral values and principles, I'm sure, with the people that you work with.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that make up our military and that defend this country.
Special people for sure. So one question that I always try and ask, and sometimes I forget, and now either reminds me or asks himself, is we do have a lot of younger lawyers, law students who listen to this podcast. And if you had an opportunity to give them, you do. You have an opportunity to give them some advice.
Here we go.
What are you telling them? The floor is open. Anything.
2 parts. Number one, on career choices. And I think you both could see this from your background to your classmates. Unfortunately, a lot of lawyers head in a direction they go towards, money or things that may not inspire them, but they're like, oh, it pays well. It's very secure. And anytime I get a chance, I tell law students, and I get to teach over at U of R, and folks that I meet that are in law school or considering, I tell them it is a great profession, but you got to be sure you pick something that inspires you, that fits with what you're about, because you'll never find anybody unhappier than a lawyer who has chosen a path that does not inspire them and they just find drudgery in every day. That is not where you want to be. So have the confidence to choose and go a direction that inspires you. And I was lucky in that my wife allowed me to do this, to leave the law firm and the pay in Dallas it started out. And then again, most recently, when I went back to Eastern District after being with a great firm here in the Richmond area, but she knew that it was not that work that really inspired me. It was the prosecution work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, service of the country, the United States, that I love. And I sure don't regret it. In fact, being an AUSA, particularly when you're a line prosecutor, as criminal chief, I would tell AUSAs all the time, you got the best job. You got the best job. Understand this. You're getting to do cases. You're in there doing the right thing, and you're in court. You've got the best job. Enjoy it. And please stay as long as you can and make a good long career. That's part of why we tell them, be sure you have balance. Don't burn out on this stuff. Be sure you're here for a long time and you have a positive impact. Those kinds of choices. And it was the same with HII when this opportunity came up. And also we got a daughter in college. We got 2 more in the hopper. And Patty and I were thinking about, it is time to help in that front. And when this opportunity came up to work for a company that is about service to the country, we knew it was one that we couldn't pass up. And it just fit with the fabric of what I'm about. So I would tell any new attorney, be sure you go somewhere that inspires you, where you're able to do what means a lot to you, help people. Number 2, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I tell new attorneys this, seek out mentors and people that will help you. That is where you get some of the best direction on being a lawyer. People that will take the time to explain to you why you do what you do. And this is one that comes to mind. We talk about Jeff Everhart. I was handling a private criminal case. I had made a mistake. And this is a guy I've been practicing for a long time. I had made a big mistake. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I called Jeff and he said, come on over. I went over to Jeff's house and we sat in his driveway and we talked it through. And he helped me so much in getting through that and also seeing the big picture. And anytime new attorneys reach out to me, I want to do the same for them. I always try to take time, even if I'm really busy. I'll say, I may not be able to do it this week, but let's talk. And to take the time to help people. Chuck Rosenberg, who's one of my number one mentors, told me years ago, always help people. And I try to. And sometimes I'm surprised when I encounter someone that just chooses not to help. I'm thinking, that doesn't reflect well on them, but it's also a missed opportunity to help people. It's crazy, right? Number 3, this will be the final thing on this, but if you want to be a great trial lawyer, and I'll tell you, and I think y'all would agree with this, there are lawyers that are so smooth, they can do just about anything, but they may not have the credibility and integrity. And then you could put them up against a lawyer that is not near as experienced or as smooth, but comes across authentic, with integrity. Juries are smart. They're going to go with the integrity and the authenticity. So I always tell young trial lawyers, be authentic to who you are. And maybe you're not going to be the smoothest. Just be sure that you get it right. Be true to your style in front of the jury or a judge. Be yourself. And then you're going to see lawyers, great lawyers that do great things and take things that make sense for you and put those in your toolbox. Some things won't work, and don't do it when it doesn't fit with who you are. And then you also just have to work incredibly hard. You have to work incredibly hard because a lot of it comes down to mastery of the facts and the evidence and understanding. And at the end of the day, do the right thing. always do the right thing, because your reputation with the judges, with the community, with the defense bar, within the office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I got to work for so many years, that's everything. And make sure you protect that and always do the right thing, even if it means dismissing a case or taking, lumps, whatever it takes. If it's the right thing, you got to do it.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure having you.
It's been great to be here. I really appreciate y'all asking me to do this. It's been an honor.
Mike, it's our pleasure, and we did the right thing by having you on this podcast. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast. For more episodes, check out rvatriallawyers.com.